Hi, everybody. This is Joanne Pino from MAC. I just wanted to, we're doing a little sound check. So if you could type in the chat box whether or not you can hear us, that would be wonderful. We want to do this so that we can start doing the presentation momentarily. Okay.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
So we're just going to sit here for a few minutes, and we're going to start right at 7 o'clock because people are signing up, and we don't want to keep people waiting that have been here on time. So thank you very much. We'll be with you shortly. No. Okay, everybody, it's 7 o'clock now, so I'm going to start because, as I said earlier, we want everybody that's been here on time to be able to benefit from being on time. So my name is Joanne Pino. I'm from the Mass Advocates for Children, and welcome to our second webinar. We are a nonprofit organization founded by Hubie Jones about 46 years ago. And if you'd like to find out more about us, you can go to our website at www.massadvocates.org. As I said, I'm Joanne Pino, and I'm going to be the presenter today. today. And my coworker, Shalene Gupta, is also here to help make sure that things are running smoothly.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here tonight.
So anyway, this is a free webinar provided by MAC, and you can, as I said, learn more about us on our website. We have different projects. I consider MAC like the umbrella organization, and we have different projects under that. One of them is our Autism Center. Another one is Boston School Reform. We have a helpline that everybody across the state can call to get questions answered. And we talk to everybody. And then if the parents or the family that's calling in needs more help, that we can try to refer them to the folks that would best be able to help them. So we, in order to help us continue our advocacy on behalf of families of children with disabilities throughout the state, and including hopefully future webinars like this one, we would appreciate your support. So you can always donate to MAC on our website anytime if that's something that you would like to do. So before we start, there's going to be a few housekeeping announcements that Shalene wants to talk about.
First of all, during the webinar, please feel free to ask questions at any time along the way. Some of you have already realized it, but there's a questions panel where you can just type in a question, and then it will come straight to me, and I'll refer it to Joanne. So we'll be stopping periodically to take those questions, so feel free to go ahead and ask. And then at the end of the webinar, a survey will pop up on the screen. Please take some time to fill it out. Some of the questions are asked by our grant foundations, and that makes these webinars possible. And in addition, we do take your feedback very seriously and have made changes based on past information. So with that in mind, let's get started.
One thing that we wanted to talk about is if you look in the little chat box, we have an address for our website, because a little further in the presentation, we're going to stop for a few minutes and have you guys look at a video. As I said, we're new to webinars, and we couldn't figure out a way that would make it work so I could just do it on my computer and you could see it, that it worked well enough. So we're going to ask you to either, type in the same address on your browser and then be able to watch the second video on the page. But I'll tell you when to do that. That's not quite yet, but I just wanted to give you a heads up that we're going to be doing that, and then we'll stop for 5 minutes while you watch the video. So anyway, doing these presentations in a webinar, it's a little bit difficult for me because I can't see your faces. So I hope that this is going to be a helpful presentation for everybody. Okay, so this presentation we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to talk about transition from school to adult life, and we're going to be showing you different ways that you can use the IEP to create the success for your children or students or whichever. And the first part of the presentation is like a little general overview about what transition is and what it can include. And then the second part is a little bit more specific to the steps for the IEP. So I think some people have already sent in some questions, and by those questions it seems like, I think the presentation answers most of them. But again, if we don't answer those questions, you can ask them again along the way, and if we feel that they weren't answered, we could read off the questions as well. So we're going to get started. Thank you so much for being here. So there are 2 laws that address transition requirements in Massachusetts, and it's a little bit confusing as both are called transition, and it involves many of the same people. So for instance, the schools are involved, the adult agencies are involved, and the parents and the youth are involved. But we are hopefully going to give you enough information so that you're going to know the difference between the 2 of them. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Individuals with Disability Education Act, also known as, we call it IDEA or IDEA, and this provides special education transition services while the student still is in school. And then there's Chapter 688, which provides services after the student leaves school. So those are the 2 laws we're going to be discussing. And again, like I said, it's a little confusing because they're both transition, but again, hopefully with this presentation, we're going to clear things up and make it so that you can follow along. So we're going to address the 2 different planning protections and services offered by these 2 special education laws, but most of the discussion is going to be on IDEA and not on the 688. We only brush upon that at the very end. So I hope that's not a problem for you. And remember, because I noticed when looking at the sign-up sheet that some of the folks here were not from Massachusetts, from other states were here too. So remember that some of the things that I'm going to be addressing, and I'll try to remember to mention it, are more specific or only specific to Massachusetts. And if I can remember to mention what I'm talking about then, I will try to do so that the folks that aren't from Massachusetts will get an idea of, how stronger math laws are in some cases. So we're going to talk about IDEA provides transition until the student graduates or turns 22, whichever happens first. And again, that's in Massachusetts. The Massachusetts transition begins at 14 and ends at 22. Other states do have different laws and different ages for the students. And IDEA requirements will help to ensure that the students will live, work, and go to college as independently as possible. And I hope that I'm going to give you some examples along the way so that you can see and try to make it a little bit more so that I'm just not talking at you, but giving you some real-life experiences from people that we've worked with throughout the years. So who's eligible for transition services? So all students 14 to 22 are eligible for transition services in Massachusetts. And again, 14 to 22, and that is specific to Massachusetts. Some states begin at 16. Federal law is 16 years old, that it begins at 16 years of age. But Massachusetts, we kept it at 14 years old. So the goal is for students to be prepared for employment, independent living, or for further education, depending on what the student's preferences are. And this sounds really good, but we know that it takes a real lot to make this happen, and it's not always easy for the families. And we're hoping that with this presentation, it will give you some tools to be able to use to help advocate for your child. Anyway, so the transition services are services that support students in each of these areas. So you might need, your child might need instructions written into the IEP on all different areas. So for instance, there will be instructions that would help the child or the youth be ready to work. And so, and each step of the process might look a little bit different depending on the age of the student and the needs of the student. So for instance, what instructions would the student need is for them to work, and so what would be some of the goals be? So maybe there would be small group interview practice, and that might start at 14, but once they're 18, they won't need that small group interview practice anymore. Or they might need one-on-one training on filling out job applications when they're 14, but when they're 16, they might be out in the community actually doing the work and working at a job. And some students might need like direct instructions by a one-on-one coach, a training coach, and that's something that might not happen until they're 17 or 18. Again, it depends on what the student's needs are. So again, like I'm saying, it's going to look very different from a 14-year-old IEP for transition compared to an 18 or 22-year-old IEP. So some goals that a student might need to live independently is maybe some cooking instructions, and that might be one-on-one in a small group during one of the times that the student is taking with another student during resource room or something like that. There might be lot of training. There should be, and not might be, there should be a lot of training on safety in the community so that the student can live independently, whether that's safety for cooking or safety for being out in the community. Transportation skills is another piece that is huge for a lot of our kids, and they need that repetitive type of instruction. And then there would be banking skills that might be needed for a lot of our kids. So the next few slides that I'm going to be showing you, well, actually, I'm going to back up for a minute. That's not true. I'm going to the next slide. So the services that are provided for the students must be based on their individual needs and take into account the student's strengths, preferences, and interests. So for an example, we had a client, and we call her Michelle, who was on the autism spectrum, and she took great photographs. But her school system had her working in a factory. So, that didn't really kind of go together. Who wants to actually go to work to a job that you have no interest in doing. Everybody wants to do something that they like and have interest in. So it's really important to match up those skills. And that's what transition is about, is to try to find out what the skills are that the student has and to find out what they need to be able to reach those skills and what they want to do. So I hope that made sense. I'm not sure if it totally did. Sometimes I can't hear myself speak. But, you know, we have, I have some other examples that we'll use along the way. Sorry. Did you need something? Okay. So one way that legislators have improved the law is to require that IEP teams, that they need to address not only the academic and the developmental needs of the student, but the functional needs of the student while developing the IEP. And I really feel that this functional piece is the piece that's going to take our kids out of the classroom and into the community to be able to learn how to better themselves and how to be as successful as possible. So it's, again, that functional piece that's taking them out of the four walls of the school. It's really important for our kids because a lot of our kids aren't can't generalize the information. So it's hard for them to take it outside of school once they've learned it. And so this piece, the functional piece, is the piece that's going to help with that generalization as well. So the next few slides that we have here are some examples of different skills that somebody might need and could be written into an IEP for the student. So, you know, again, I already talked a little bit about this, the paid job opportunities for students and what type of support options would be needed for them, how to fill out job applications. I already kind of talked about that a little bit too, and job interview skills and strategies. That's something that a lot of students need a lot of help in because not only, you know, don't they make eye contact or, you know, have a hard time doing that. So it's really important to teach the student and the young person to be able to make that eye contact and to be able to dress appropriately when they're going for job interviews. And also, you know, workplace relationships is another piece that students need to be able to function in a workplace because, you know, our kids need to know that you need to act differently when you're at work, when you're out with your friends, or when you're out in the community. And unless you're in there actually doing it, it's hard for them to know how to act and work. So it's really important. And another thing with the job interview skills, too, by the way, is that it shouldn't just involve just learning how to be a good person to be interviewed, but also to teach them how to do the interviewing because some of our kids might need to hire, you know, people to take care of them down the line, so they need to know what questions should be asked. So just different things like that. So one of the things that they could do is they could take turns during maybe like a speech and language class, and this helps with speech and language as well, and the interview skills and people taking turns being the one being interviewed and the one interviewing. So there's just all different ways to think outside the box to be able to make this very successful. And again, this is going to look differently. I'm not saying that every student's IEP should have something, every one of these. That's not the case. It's really important that once they find out what, you know, services your child needs, it's going to be very individualized, just like an IEP should. So now these are just some examples of independent living skills that might be written into an IEP, and so how to use public transportation. Or some of our kids might be able to learn how to drive a car, or driver's education. That's something that absolutely could be written into an IEP. And again, I can't stress enough safety. Safety issues should be addressed throughout the IEP for kids that are, you know, learning to go into the community, learning how to live independently is really important to teach them the safety skills that go along with that. Another example could be banking and purchasing skills should be written into it, or can be written into an IEP, again, depending on the need of the child. But I kind of joke around a little bit about this one. Like, I think I'm the only one left that actually balances their checkbook, because I think, you know, kids nowadays use their debit cards and they just go to the machine and, you know, they take the money out. But one thing is that they really need to teach the young person not to give out their PIN number because, you know, that's the safety issue of having a debit card. And I think, too, even though most people do use debit cards nowadays and they do shopping with that and all that, which I think is a great thing, I still think our kids should be taught how to make change with money and how to go to a store and purchase things with cash as well. Because what happens if one day they didn't have their bank card or they lost their bank card and they needed to use it? So it's something just to think about. Another, for a lot of kids or for some of the kids, self-management of medical needs is something that might be important for them. So again, all these goals and objectives could be written in there of how to, teach a child or teach them how to, be able to take their own medications, how to make a doctor's appointment, how to go to the doctors, what questions to ask. And, nowadays a lot of us have smartphones, so it's a lot easier to set reminders, to set, alarms to go off when you need to take your medication. So there's actually things that in the world out there that are making some of this a little bit easier. But anyway, so I'm not going through every single one of these, but again, going back to teaching somebody to also not just be interviewed, but know how to interview, is if they ever have to hire a PCA for themselves, a personal care attendant, would be one of the reasons why they would need to have some interviewing skills so that they could find out if that person might be able to, they might be able to work with the person, the PCA that would be, spending quite a long time with them during the day. So these are just some of the examples of independent living skills. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the transition services for college for students. And, it's the schools can be responsible if the child needs it to help them identify and apply. I mean, they do this for quote-unquote typical students as well, but sometimes our kids need a little bit more help, to figure out, how to fill out the applications, how to fill out, and maybe, filling out the applications and filling out anything else that might need to be sent along to a school as well. And our students might have to learn how to get some campus support, how to self-identify. Again, that's something that's very personal, but a lot of kids have to realize that once they go up to the college level, if they don't self-identify, they won't get the services they need. They won't get those, study skills or the tutors that they might need to help them be successful. So they need to understand that. Again, time management skills is something that need to be worked on by a lot of students, not just typical kids, but and study skills is something that a lot of our kids really need a lot of work on. I usually tell a little bit of a story here, and it's actually not. It's a true story, and it's actually very close to my heart. And there was this young man who had gone to their guidance counselor and asked them for help in identifying colleges so that he might be able to go to a college that would, so he could had something to do with the weather, okay? And so the guidance counselor said to him, and I'm saying this is close to my heart, and one of the things that's close to my heart because it is my child that I'm talking about. He's a lot older now, but this was a while ago. But the guidance counselor turned around to him and said, well, not everybody's cut out to go to college. Maybe you could consider being an electrician. And, he was very upset over this. And, again, it's not because we have anything against the trades, because we really don't. My husband's a carpenter, and he's been a great provider for us for many, many years. But we wanted more for our kids. My husband, he's a carpenter, and he's not quite 60 and had 2 back operations. So we wanted our children to go to school and to be able to be as successful as they can without having to do that type of labor. And so I was very upset. And as an advocate for my child, I did go up to the school, and I told the school that I didn't want that counselor to be working with him anymore, and that they had to give him a new guidance counselor, which they did do. And so he was okay afterwards. We talked, and he had the support. And that's something that, really struck me, is that could you imagine if that person had said it to somebody who didn't have the same supports at home that my son had, that maybe that kid would have just given up and not bothered to go on to college, because my son did finish college. It took him a little bit extra, but that's okay. He did finish. So I do have to say that once he finished and he got his diploma, I took a picture of his, I actually copied it on a copy machine and shrunk it down a little bit, his diploma and put it into a frame and wrote a letter to the guidance counselor and, told her that maybe that she should think twice before saying things like that to students and hoping it would make a difference. It probably didn't, but it made me feel a little bit better. So I just hope that, she would stop doing that, although I've heard that she really hasn't. She still does say things like that, which is too bad. So our kids, really need our support, and this is the way that I have supported my children, and I'm sure that's why you're here, is to learn how to support your kids as well. We're going to just do a couple more of these dorm living skills. A lot of our kids are going to be going on to college, and they need to understand that it's not the same as living at home. You kind of do have to be a little bit neater than maybe they are in their room right now at that time, but it's a great opportunity to be able to teach these kids these skills that they would need to be successful in the college setting. Self-advocacy skills, again, that goes back to the self-identifying and then being able to ask for things that they might not normally have asked for. It's something that we really need to give our children. I think it's really important that they get that skill to be able to be successful, because if they go to college or maybe if they're at work, we're not going to be there all the time as the parents. And that's something that we really need to realize, that we need to give them this skill so that they can advocate for what they need. And hopefully by doing it, we're showing them how to do it as well. But again, this is something that a lot of kids might need extra work on, and it needs to be written in the IEP of how to self-advocate. And that's something that can happen. And again, it's not for every student, but for some, but whoever's needed. All right, so now we're going to, actually now is the section that I told you that down in the little chat box, there's a link to our website. And I can actually take you to, I think I can take you to the link to the website, but I can't show you the video because it doesn't show up that great. And we're hoping that you will be able to watch it now. So if you go to that link, and it will take you to our website on the transition page, and there's 2 videos on that page. If you scroll to the second video, and we're going to put up a timer for about 5 minutes, if you can watch that video and then come back to us, and then we'll open it to questions before we move a little bit further. And the questions can include this inclusive concurrent enrollment. That's what this video is about. I'll let you go in a minute to go watch it, but in 2007, there was a pilot program for this inclusive concurrent enrollment initiative. And what it did, it allowed for students 18 to 22 the opportunity to attend college courses while they were still enrolled in school, in high school and on IEPs. And it would allow for education coaches to go with them to help navigate the campus, and to help them with some focusing on whatever social issues might be there. This is a great initiative that was advocated for by MAC and still is. Like I said, it started in 2007, and every year we have to advocate for money to be put into the budget for this. We're actually in that process right now. This initiative has been so helpful to so many different young students. And so if you have a student that's 18 to 19 years old, they cannot have passed MCAS in order to participate in this program. So that's what I'm talking, when you go and to watch the video, you'll see how the students, this is for students with severe disabilities. And then once the student's 20 to 22, if they have passed MCAS but they're still enrolled in school, they can then participate in the ICE program. It's the ICE program, the Inclusive Concurrent Enrollment Initiative. So this is just part of the legislation that MAC has worked on, or just one piece of legislation that MAC has worked on. And it's a wonderful opportunity. And I think the video is going to show more than I can say about it, so I'd like to take you just to the website now. And then if you guys can, either copy the link or type in, this massadvocates.org/transition, okay, and go to our website. But I'll show you a little bit how to do it. So if that's okay, so if you go to our website, oops, we're going to open another link here. And then once we're here, I'll put up the 5-minute timer. the link, if you copy and paste it, will take you directly to the page with the video on it. And unfortunately, if I showed it to you here, you'd probably not want to watch it because it doesn't show well. So we're going to skip the first video and go to the second one, and if you watch that, we'll give you 5 minutes, and then we're going to start talking again, okay? So I'm going to start a timer now. All right. I didn't realize it had a timer at the end, so kind of scared me. But thank you so much. I hope you took the time to watch the video. If you haven't, then I really recommend that you watch it later. I hope you get another opportunity to watch it later on, because it really shows some remarkable programs that are helping our kids while going to college, and it's really been amazing opportunity for a lot of people. And I just want to tell a little tiny story here, and then we're going to open it to questions. So MAC, you know, now, which is something that's kind of new, we've probably been doing this probably about 4 years now, or maybe 3, is that we have a youth fellowship program, and youth can apply to MAC to be able to do this 1-year fellowship. And it's something that, you know, we felt that we had to do as MAC, as an organization, and we want our the people that we're advocating for, the youth with disabilities, to be able to get jobs in the community. Well, we figured we had to be, you know, giving jobs to our kids that we work for. And so we created this youth fellowship. We got grants for it, and it allows for kids to come work here. And again, each of the kids and I say kids, and I mean that in a very loving way. I mean, I should say youth, but I can't help but call them kids, because my kids will always be my kids. And but you know, allows them to come learn their work experience here at MAC. And we've had some wonderful kids coming through here. And I just want to give you an example of how maybe, you know, how it's so important to advocate. So we have one youth. Both these youth are from the same town. I'm not going to mention the town. And both these youth have the same disability, actually. But, you know, again, just because you have the same disability doesn't mean that you have the exact same services in your IEP, which is absolutely true for almost all disabilities. But this is just, you know, going to show that unless you advocate for your child, you might not get the best services that are out there. So we had one of the youth. He was our first youth fellow, and he's a young man, and he came to us as our first youth fellow, very excited to be working with us. He lived in a town that did some wonderful transition services with him, and actually he, you know, graduated with a blank diploma with his class. He participated in graduation ceremony and the prom and all that stuff. But he knew he was going to be staying on further in his town to be able to get some services. So he participated in the graduation ceremony. You ask him, he tells you he had 2 graduations. And he came here as after he did the graduation ceremony, he went back into school. He was getting some tutoring to help him to be able to pass. He had already passed one part of the MCAS. He was, I think he passed the English. He couldn't pass the math. So he was getting some tutoring to pass the math part of it. And he was coming here as part of, to be our youth fellow. So they were teaching him transportation training, and they brought him here with somebody to come with him for a while, and they eventually backed off that he could be able to come here by himself independently. And it was a wonderful opportunity for him. He was also participating in the Inclusive Concurrent Enrollment Initiative program. And he took some wonderful courses up at the college. He came here. He was getting tutoring. So he was really in his hometown school because, as you know, the law says that our kids should be taught in the least restricted environment. And at 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, or up to the 22, the least restricted environment isn't the high school because they have no peers there. Their peers have all graduated. So it is in the community. It is in the college and in the job world. So this is what he was doing. So they actually provided him with some very good transition services through the IEP process. And then we had a young lady who came with us just recently, who's from the exact same town, but and had the same disability, but wasn't her parents weren't able to advocate for her as well as the young man's was. So she didn't go to the ICE program. She did come here to do our fellowship, and she was coming here with supports, but it just wasn't the same, and she wasn't as prepared. So this is why it's so important to advocate for our kids for our transition services. And we're going to open it up to questions, and then we're going to talk about the different steps to ensure that schools school transition services are provided for your kids. So Shalene's going to help me with the questions, and we'll go from there.
Terrific. We've got a lot of great ones coming in. All right, first of all, Joanne, you had mentioned earlier an example of someone who had great photography skills but ended up in a factory.
Right.
Question, how did their parents or someone advocate for them to go into a photography stream instead of the factory?
Well, that's actually a really good question, and I usually bring that up a little bit later in the presentation, but we can talk about it now. A lot of times it takes not just the parent advocating, but sometimes, depending on the situation, they need to go further. They might need to hire an advocate. They might need to hire an attorney, all depending on the town, what services, it just all depends. So the family needs to be able to have backup documentation that's saying that they like that this is something that the student could do, that it's something that they should be working on. And that's part of the transition process, because if they had done the transition process the right way and found out what the student's strengths, preferences, and interests were, then maybe they could have lined up what she was interested in with a job in the community. So like you're saying, it would have been so much better. She could have maybe even worked at CVS in the photo department or in an art museum, depending on the town. There's something that might interest her more than just working in a factory. So again, there's different steps to take that you need to make sure that that they did the right assessments, and we talk about that in the next section. So what the assessments that should be done for the students, and to find out what their interests are and what they want to do, and then how to make that happen through the IEP process. And it's not an easy process, but if you know what your rights are, it makes it a little bit easier.
A question about the IEP process. Who's responsible for writing the transition services into the IEP? I'm being told by my school and district that they're only responsible for education goals instead of, say, community skills or living skills.
And with the language that I had used earlier is that on one of the earlier slides that said that it was the school's responsibility to do this. So that's actually not accurate. Your school shouldn't be saying that the school should be able to write goals and objectives that are going to help the student to be successful once they leave school. That's in the law. It's written in there, and I don't have the site here, but you can actually probably email me or call our helpline, and we can help find that site for you later on where it's written in the law is what I mean by the site, and we could get that information to you if you call our helpline, which has the information on the end. But the language says it requires IEP team, so the IEP team all have to agree that this is something that the student might need to be successful or will need to be successful, and but the IEP team has to address the academic, the developmental, and the functional needs of the student. So again, that's the functional piece isn't always the educational piece, but it's how to take what they learned in school for applying for jobs or for doing interviewing processes and bringing it into the community. So I hope that answered your question. I can get you the actual site, the law for that. If you want, you can call our helpline, which is at the end. Number is at the end of the presentation.
So, question about functional. Could you talk more about what that word means or sort of looks like for an overage middle school student?
Well, again, it's hard to do that if I don't know more information, because everybody's functional is different, So for the young man, maybe let's see if I can put this into perspective with the example I gave you of the young man who was coming here who was our youth fellow, and he was actually in an older video of the inclusive concurrent enrollment. You can probably find that older video on YouTube somewhere if you type in inclusive concurrent enrollment. And there was a young man, he's a young man that was here with us, and he talked about how he wanted to be either an actor, a director, or a lawyer. And so, you know, somebody had said to us, or to me, when I was doing one of these presentations, you know, it's like, well, you know, how can he be a lawyer? Well, you know what, you know, maybe he couldn't be a lawyer, but you have to understand that let's figure out, you're not going to go up and tell him, oh, you can never be a lawyer, let's do something else. I would, as a parent and an advocate, I would never accept that from my child, somebody saying that to my child, because we expect that, or I expect that they have high expectations for all kids coming into school, so I would hope that they wouldn't say that to them. But what they could do is they could say, okay, well, if you want to be an attorney, this is what we need to do. You need to take science, history classes. You need to take, you know, all these law classes. Is that something that you still want to do? And if possible, then let him take them and try to make him be as successful as he can. So right now, this young man, although he might not be a lawyer, he is working at the State House, making differences in advocating for this ICE program. So I don't know if that answered your question, and I can't get your answer, yes or no yet, without, but I hope that gave an example of functional, like, so it just depends on each youth that, you know, maybe they might not be able to be that lawyer that they originally wanted to be, but he's actually making a difference with the law by advocating at the State House with the legislators he's working with.
So clarification question, Joanne.
Yes.
Can only kids who have intellectual disabilities access the ICE program?
So yeah, so it's for kids with severe disabilities. So and it is more for the kids that have the lower functioning skills that we talked about, because if you're talking about somebody who has a physical disability but they are still, you know, very, you know, a very, say, 100 IQ, they could get into school without the ICE program. So that's where the ICE program is coming in to play, is for those kids that have the intellectual piece of it. Although I suppose because at between 20 and 22, if they're still in school and they're higher functioning and they haven't graduated yet, they could participate in the ICE program because they can have passed MCAS and participate at that age. So I don't know if that really answers the question.
And so there was one clarification question. So
yep.
You have to pass MCAS or not pass MCAS?
So between the ages of 18 and 19 years old, they cannot have passed MCAS to participate. But once they're 20 and 21, they can have passed MCAS.
Gotcha. And now, so was the ICE program expanded to include all colleges in Massachusetts, or do you have to be part of a certain district, or what if your college, you know, what if your school doesn't have?
Right, that's another very good question. So unfortunately, not every college in Massachusetts participates yet. That's something that we hope will happen down the line. But so depending on where you live is some of the colleges that are participating. There's, I believe, this is an old map, there are 14 colleges participating right now. And I'm taking my map off my wall so that I can read them for you. UMass Amherst, Holyoke Community College, Westfield State College, Mount Wachusett Community College, Salem State University, Northern Essex Community College, Middlesex Community College, Bunker Hill Community College, Roxbury Community College, Mass Boston, Mass Bay Community College, Framingham State University, Bridgewater State University, and Cape Cod Community College are all participating right now. So if it's not the college or that you would want your child to go to, maybe there's one in your area, because there's, you know, there's quite a few of them. And now with Mount Wachusett participating, although I don't think they're taking students quite yet, they will be soon. And Framingham, you know, it's opening up to almost the whole state that might be able to reach out to. And if you're not part of a partnership, then you could ask your school and advocate for your child, to be part of the ICE program. I know somebody from Somerville advocated for their child, and Somerville this year just became partners with Bunker Hill Community College. So, more and more towns are participating because this is being, more and more people are learning about the program. So,
can a school tell you that they can't participate due to budget cuts?
Say that again?
Do all public schools have to offer this, or can they claim that due to budget cuts, they're not as...
No. Well, right now, the ICE program is a grant program, so there's not that much of a cost for schools right now, although depending on how many services are provided to the student. But if the team agrees that your child will benefit and participate in the ICE program, then they cannot say that they don't have the money to do it. They need to do it if the team agrees that that's something that would be beneficial for your child.
And then before we move on, is there a website that you would recommend looking at for more information on the ICE program?
On the ICE program? Okay.
Sorry, on the ICEIC.
Yeah. They just changed the name. We used to call it ICE, but it has some bad, ICE isn't always appropriate name to things, so we changed it to the Massachusetts Inclusive Enrollment, so it's like mice, I don't know, we can't figure out what to call it anymore. But, so I know, well, our website, we have the videos. We only gave you 5 minutes to watch one video, but there is another video on our website. You can look at that. There is the Executive Office of Education has some information on ICE. They're actually the ones who are kind of overseeing ICE. His name, the Executive Office of Education, and Glenn Gabbard is the person that works there, and you can contact him for more information. There is some information on their website as well. Again, our website has some information on it, and thinkcollege.org, I believe it is, has information. That link is at the end. That information is at the end of our presentation as well. I think that's in there, Think College. If not, I'll add it on there. I don't actually see it on there, but I'll have to add it on there for another time. But Think College is another one.
And for those of you who are interested, I'm also getting some suggestions on the chat, which I will send out to everybody of website. And keep those questions coming in. We're here, and we want to answer them, and we'll be pausing later.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to move on. Let me find my page again. Sorry, I had switched over. Okay, and so as I said earlier, now, let's go to the next slide. We're going to talk about steps to, ensure transition services through the IEP. Okay. So the foundation of good transition is a good transition assessment, and we're hoping, and the goal is that the transition assessments will help define the student's strengths, preferences, and interests. And if it hasn't happened already, that at 14 years old, that you as a parent or as a provider could request a transition assessment for your students. And I have another example here of somebody that I have worked with that had a daughter, a young lady actually, who is on the autism spectrum. And she had her school do an assessment, and their school did a transition assessment with a tool called Tools for Transition. And one of the things with this young lady, she's, I think 18 years old now, but when they first started to do the assessment, anybody that talked to this young lady, she's on the spectrum, very friendly, and, really tells you exactly what, she wants to be when she gets older and where she wants to work. So, you talk to her for 5 minutes and she wants to work in a retail store because she loves fashion. So her mom had asked that, in writing, and we have actually on our website as well at massadvocates.org at the transition section, same page as the emails. The videos, if you scroll down, we have some examples of letters, how to request an assessment on there. And but she had used the letter, and she requested the assessment. The school system did it, and the school came up with, when they came to the team meeting, they all sat down, the mom was there, and they said, oh yeah, the assessment showed that she should be a plumber. And I think that they just kind of didn't even think of who they were doing this assessment for, because again, if they had done, you know, the right type of assessment on this young lady, is that they would have known that there's no way she wanted to be a plumber, that she wants to work in retail. And so, like, when the words came out of their mouths, they just said to the mom, okay, where do you want to go for an outside assessment? Because they knew they messed up. So it's really kind of scary that that could happen in this day and age. So that's why it's really important that you make sure as parents that you oversee what assessments that they're doing. So one place you can get a list of assessments is the Department of Education's website. They have a list of informal and formal assessments, which, you know, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's just, at least you can get an idea of what type of assessments that you should be asking for. And as I said, we also have the letter on our website that is a sample letter of how to ask for an assessment. You know, please provide age-appropriate formal and informal transition assessments necessary to evaluate my child's individual needs related to future training, education, employment, and independent living, and taking into account their strengths, my son's, daughter's, whatever, strengths, preferences, and interests. And one of the parts of an assessment should be a structured interview that, and that's written in this letter as well as like a self-determination type of assessment. So those are things that should be asked for. You can ask for it. Get this letter off our website and change it any way you want. It's a Word document that you could do that. But the school really needs to do the assessments in these areas, that what training, like I said in the letter, what education, what employment, it needs to be done, what training needs to be done on all those areas. So again, you know, make sure that you do this in writing when you're asking the school for an assessment. It's really important. And if they haven't done it already, you should ask for it in writing and ask them to do the transition assessment.
Joanne, 2 questions before you go on.
Yeah, I'm not making sense. I feel like I'm rambling. Yes.
You're good. You're good. First of all, can you mention that website again?
Which one? Which website? It's MAC's website.
The link of the formal and informal assessment.
Oh, sure. That's the Department of Education's website. So it's DOE.edu, I think, www.ma, I don't know what it is. But I think it's at the back of the things. Let me take a look. At the back of the handout. Why isn't that in here? I can get that for you if we can Google it. I can do it at the end of the presentation. If I can, we can Google the Department of Education and get their website. But that list is there. And actually, I think this list is also on our website. So, again, our website is the same link that you had used to go to the video. And if you scroll further down, I believe all the other information is on there as well. But it's the Department of Education, the Massachusetts Department of Education's website.
And then a second clarification question. Do you, as a parent, have to request the transition assessment from the school, or is the school required to give one automatically?
Well, the schools should be giving them automatically when the student is, you know, the year that they're going to be 14. But if they don't, then you should ask for it. Or if, you know, they hadn't already and your child's a little bit older, then you should make the request. I do believe the school is required to do assessments to do that, but and to do the assessments for transition. But if they haven't, this is where you should, you know, take the bull by the horn and send a letter. Okay. I was actually trying to use my phone to do the DOE's website.
Oh, I've got it here. I'll send it out.
Oh, just quick. Okay, thank you. Okay, see, this is why it's great to have a partner when you're doing these multi-webinars. Anyway, so, okay, so, again, request age-appropriate transition assessments in writing from the school and address each of these areas: training, education, employment, and independent living if necessary or appropriate. So we're talking about now the second step, which then would be youth participation. So when the student turns 14, it is important that they are invited to the meeting. And it's really important to figure out the best way for the student to participate in the IEP process. And because it's really important to get their intake, their view, and I really feel that a lot of times it's really important to start including the student, because then they become more aware of where they need more help, and it will help them to become self-advocates. It's not a perfect world, but I didn't do it at first, and I kind of sit back now and look back, because I actually don't know if at the beginning I mentioned that I had 2 kids. Both of them were on IEPs when they were younger, and so now they're older and out of school and out of college, and looking back, I can say that I wished I had invited them or had them stay during the IEP meetings a little bit more, because the school did the invitations. They invited them, and like a lot of parents, I let them stay 10 minutes and say, okay, fine, go back to school or to your classes. But I think sometimes it's really important that to include them a little bit more, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. But and it's really important to figure out different ways for the student to participate. And again, depending on the student's disability is how they're going to participate. So some of the ways is that maybe you could have the school, and it could be written into the IEP. In order for the student to participate in the team meetings, they need to learn what an IEP team meeting is. And so they could do mock IEP team meetings during resource room time or during speech and language. They could have some maybe social stories written into the IEP to talk about what the IEP team meeting is going to be talking about, and the back and forth of the school and the parents, and asking for different services. And like I said, again, at first I really didn't think it was that important to have my kids participate, but I really feel that it really helps to prepare the youth to be able to advocate for themselves when I'm not there, when they're at work, when they're in the community, or when they're in school. So I think that's a huge piece of why it's really important to have the kids participate. And some school systems are really picking up on this. And another thing, too, is that not that transition is a new thing. It's been in the law, but there's a lot more focus on it now. So I think a lot more towns are actually, struggling and now learning, what they have to do, to the questioners, that the town was saying, oh, no, I don't have to do the, do anything outside of the school. Well, they're wrong in that, but they just maybe don't realize it yet, because the Department of Ed is now creating and doing webinars on their own about transition. They actually had conferences on it that is helping to educate the school departments about what their rights, what they need to be doing for these kids. So, again, it's really important to start doing this. Yep.
A quick clarification question.
Yep.
If a student isn't 14, like they're 13 and then going to turn 14 that summer, can they still go?
To the IEP meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, you could. You can really invite them anytime you want. And again, I think it depends on the student. Some students, at 13 act like they're, 19. So that's somebody that might be appropriate to go. So it just all depends on the student. But by law, they don't have to be invited till they're 14. But you can, have your child participate as young as you want, if that's the case. So, again, I just really feel that it's really important to, have these kids learn how to participate in these meetings, so that when they're leaving school and they're leaving their parents and going into, that they will then learn how to ask for themselves. So it's just a self-advocacy way to be more a self-advocate, at least in my opinion. So, and I was going to say too that some of the schools are now also doing a lot to have the kids participate as well. And the goal is to actually have the student be able to run their own IEP team meeting, which would be really very exciting. And, and each student, again, depending on their needs, may have to learn how to do this a little bit differently. But some school systems are helping students, that even nonverbal students, to create a a PowerPoint presentation to present at a team meeting so that they could tell, the whole team what their interests and, what they want to do when they get out of school. So there's just all different ways to have your student be able to, and your child to be able to participate. So one thing, the next step is for step 3, and it requires, it's the transition planning form. And transition planning forms are required forms that to help organize and prepare for the IEP team meeting. And one thing to remember is the transition planning form is not part of the IEP. So whatever is written in the transition planning form will then have to be rewritten into the IEP. So it is a form. You can see this form from our website or from the Department of Education's website. But it's like a guide on how to fill out and to fill it out and to come up with different ideas. And then those ideas can go into the IEP. So it is a tool to use to plan for whatever services that the student might need. But unless it's written into the IEP, those services might not happen. So just make sure you're aware of that, and remember that just because it's written into the IEP, the transition planning form, doesn't mean that schools would automatically follow it. And the legal document is the IEP part of it, so it needs to be written into the IEP. Okay. So now we're on to step 4, which are goals. So we want to make sure that the IEP includes measurable post-secondary and annual IEP transition goals that are related to training, education, employment, and independent living. And so I'm going to give you, a couple of different examples. So, it's funny because a lot of different students don't always know what they want to do, and I'm even talking about your typical students as well. But once, there's interests are determined by either talking one-on-one to the student or by doing the person-centered planning and other assessments, then the school can determine what goals and objectives should be written into the IEP and into the fields where they're more interested. So, I was doing this presentation one time at a college, and one of the teachers there had asked, they said that they had students that wanted to be an astronaut, and they had some pretty they were disabled. They had a disability. I'm not sure what the disability was, but but the way the teacher asked me was, how do you tell the student that they can't be, an astronaut? And again, it's one of these things that as a parent, I kind of cringe because it's like, well, you don't. Let's figure out. Okay, you want to be an astronaut. This is what you need to do. You need to take 25 science courses, and maybe just not build it up so that the student might realize, like, oh, well, I didn't do well in math. How else can I do this? Is there another way? Because the student might not be an astronaut, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be able to work at NASA. They might be able to create some great computer programs for NASA or something like that. So it's not to discourage them, but then it's to encourage them to be successful as they can be. And again, going back to the young man who was here at MAC, is that, he wanted to be a lawyer. They didn't tell him, oh, no, you can't be the lawyer, but he is now working at the State House making a difference and making changes to the law. So, again, it might not be exactly a lawyer, but he's doing some wonderful work. So, and just going a little bit on, I did see that teacher later on down the line, and, they actually did do that after they had been to the training, and they sat down with the students and they, talked to them and to try to find out, what exactly they wanted to do, for NASA, and I mean, they said they wanted to be an astronaut, but then, comes to find out that the student didn't like to fly. So, they didn't realize quite exactly that an astronaut really does have to fly. So it kind of took care of itself. But again, a lot of these questions would take care of themselves if they're doing those interest inventories and, really good one-on-one talking to the students to, person-centered planning. So, And another example is that we had a friend of my coworkers is a young lady who is nonverbal, but she has a beautiful singing voice. And the school had her work, excuse me, had her working in McDonald's. And so, that again, like I said earlier, nobody really wants to go to a job that they don't like and, or have no interest in. So this is, did they even talk to this girl? Did they know her any better? Because she actually has a device that she can communicate with. But, let's rewrite those goals and objectives and have her working someplace that would benefit her, that, she's a singer. Well, maybe she could work in a record store. Maybe she could work at, somewhere else at, a recording studio or something. So you have to just, think outside the box sometimes for a lot of our kids. Okay, so now we're talking about to determine transition services. So specific transition services can be listed in the IEP, related to employment, college, self-advocacy, independent living, transportation, and I can't even read my writing, so it's about transportation anyway. So some students may need a range of experiences to know exactly what type of transition that they want to do. And again, like you have typical kids who are going to college that are changing their changing their majors because they changed their mind. So that's the same thing. Why wouldn't our kids be doing the same thing, change their mind? So each year you need to make sure that the transition assessments are looked at and redone to make sure that they're still going to be on the same track, because maybe the student changed their mind. But there's some programs that what they do for the students is, like, the first half of the year is they have them working at 3 different places of what they were interested in. And then on the second half of the year, they get to choose the one that they liked best and learn more specific skills for that specific job site. So, there's just different ways to look at things. So, and it's something that you can ask your school to do, is to, write in 3 different jobs locations for the for the 9th grade, say, for instance, or for the 10th grade, and then the 11th grade, do it depending on the needs of the student, is how long you might have to practice those skills that are needed and be there, like, really, a job coach one-on-one with the student, for the first half of the year and then back off the second. Again, it just all depends on the student. And one of the things, too, if you come away with nothing else, is that about graduation, and that, one of the things is that we feel and that graduation is a placement, and it can be rejected by the parent on the youth, or the youth, depending on who's there for the IEP. And if the parent or the youth rejects graduation, that means stay put comes into effect, and the student stays in the program that they were in until, whatever is going on is figured out. So it's really important that if the school is saying, oh no, your child has, this is really important, I think, for the youth that have a very high functioning youth, and so the kids with the high functioning Asperger's or autism Asperger's type of thing, is that they have, they've passed all their courses in high school, and but honestly, they leave the school and they can't cross the street. This is what's really important for these kids, is that you say, great, the school saying, no, you got to graduate, but that's not really the case, and that you have to really be careful that you protect your kids and say, okay, no, I don't agree, I'm not taking that diploma, we're going to stay put and get things worked out. So if you come away with nothing from this presentation, at least just remember that. So, and we're going to be stopping here as well to answer some questions again. So if Shalene has some questions there for us, and
lots
of questions. Okay, so I'm going to try to answer the questions.
First off, a broad question. As a parent, how do you decipher which skills should be taught by you as a parent or guardian, and what falls under the domain of the school?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a very broad and general question, so it's hard to know and answer. But I think, the schools, they, it's written in the law somewhere, and Julia Landau, who is the attorney that works here, I don't know, she might even have the regs, but she's always told me that, the school can't ask the parent to do more than they ask a typical parent of a typical developing student. So, I think it's all up for grabs to a certain degree. I mean, as a parent, I teach my kids, you have to, dress appropriately. I've taught them that. But you know what? When it comes to kids with disabilities, well, they might need a little extra help and a little extra. So then it would become the school's responsibility. The same thing for, the social piece of it, okay? I try to teach my child, or I have taught my children, this is how you come, you play with friends, you're nice, you don't hit, you don't fight. But you know what? Some of our kids need more help in that. And that's when it would become the school's responsibility to help out in that. I don't know if that kind of answered your question, but I hope it did.
And then lots of questions about that graduation date and rejecting it. Two-parters. First, if the school is throwing a graduation date at you, how do you reject it? What do you say to them? And then secondly, what agencies or other resources can you go to for help with rejecting that graduation date and getting your child services?
Okay. So, so Mass Advocates here, us, MAC here, you can call MAC, our helpline, and they're very good at giving some technical assistance and advice on how to do these things, okay, the steps that you need to take, okay? So they're one place that you could call. There's different, again, it depends on what your needs are, but you might need to have an attorney for this. You might not. It just all depends. If you have the backup documentation, if you have a neuropsych eval that's saying that, this child's IQ is, say 80, which, it isn't, say 80, but, they really cannot function outside of school, then that might be enough for you to be able to get some more services, and that they're not going to, that they would back off for graduating your student, But, so you can get advice from here at MAC, our helpline. You can call the Disability Law Center. They would give you advice on this as well. Probably even the Federation for Children with Special Needs. There's different agencies out there that would be able to help answer some of your questions about this. But as a parent, I would, be doing a letter, and it's just like rejecting an IEP. So they're saying that, right, this now your child's going to graduate, they don't need an IEP anymore, or whatever, they're graduating, and they won't need an IEP. You can write a letter saying at this time I'm rejecting the placement of graduation, and that I'm requesting stay put for my child until things are worked out. And so that's, hopefully you'll already have some of the evaluations that you might need, as backup documentation. And you may need to get an advocate and an attorney. And, we can give you names of those folks if you call our helpline.
And now, what if your child did graduate but didn't pass the MCAS? Is there anything they can do, like once you've accepted that graduation date but it really wasn't appropriate?
Well, you're saying that they didn't pass MCAS, so they really technically have not graduated. And depending on their age, if they left school and they're not 22 yet, then they could maybe be titled for compensatory services. Again, that's something that you could call our helpline about or talk to an attorney. But, because I don't know all the circumstances, I hate to kind of answer without knowing a little bit more. But, if the child was 22 and left school and never got a diploma, there's you can still be taking courses or taking the MCAS over again to try to do it. Although the school, once the child is 22 or is 22, they aren't responsible for helping tutoring the student or anything to pass MCAS. But I don't know if that was the answer to your question, but it's kind of a two-parter depending on your age of your student, your child.
And now a couple questions about who qualifies for transition services. First of all, what if somebody has a single physical disability, such as a visual impairment or a hearing impairment? Is the school still required to perform a a transition assessment?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because now you need to find out what your child, I'm still going to say child, I'm sorry, would need, to be able to be successful in the community. So yes, absolutely, they should be doing transition assessments and teaching them how to be out in the world. That is part of the school's responsibility. Absolutely, and they should be able to figure out. I mean, it might be something as easy as teaching them. Actually, I can't picture it being easy. Actually, in my head now that I said that, but sorry. Yeah. Repeat the question. I don't think I answered it, and I apologize for not. Can you repeat it? Or do you think I answered it?
I think you.
Okay.
Got it, yeah.
Okay.
And then next of all, what about a student who's very high functioning, has a high IQ, and ICE doesn't cover the career options that they're interested in? Are there other similar programs offered by private colleges that they can turn to?
Yeah, well, there are a lot of private colleges that really do have some really good services for kids with disabilities. So you really need to look into the different colleges that have those options. My kids, although they had disabilities, like I said, they were in IEPs when they were little, all through high school, and both of them went to college, and they went to 2 different colleges. My oldest son went to UMass Lowell, and they had some really good services for kids with disabilities at UMass Lowell, and they did a lot of different things with him. He was allowed to be able to have extended time on tests and at papers. He was allowed to have a tape recorder to tape the sessions, the classes that the professors were doing. He had a note taker written down into his 504 plan that they followed, and so they had a lot at UMass Lowell. And then my other son had gone up to a college it was a state college, but up in New Hampshire, and they didn't have as many services. And I really felt that he struggled more because they didn't have some of the services. And again, I think it was because of the size of the school. But there are a lot of schools out there that do focus, and some of them private colleges, I'm talking, that focus on kids with disabilities. And by law, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on, is that schools have to, provide some accommodations for students in the college setting, and that is that's a law that they have to do that. So they can still get accommodations, although not as many as they do in high school and covered under special education. So.
And then a quick clarification before
Yeah.
we move on. When you say graduation, are you saying graduation with high school requirements and state requirements that can be rejected, or are you talking about the certificate of attainment?
No, so the certificate of attainment is not considered graduation. They don't get a diploma. So I guess you could say you're rejecting the diploma, maybe, I guess. So maybe that's the clarification, is that, because when they turn 22 and they're leaving the school without a diploma, there's nothing you can really reject there. But then we're going to be talking, actually, it's a good segue into the next section of the 688 referrals and things in adult services. So that's something that we'll be talking about in the next section, and then we'll stop again for a few questions after that. So we might as well. Was that it on the questions? So, all right, perfect. So, okay. So this is just, remember, transition goals and services must be based on a young adult's needs, taking into account their strengths, preferences, and interests. And I usually just, kind of go back to Michelle a little bit and brainstorm ways to get her involved into doing something else with photography, because we talked about how she was working in a factory, and even though she took great pictures. So there's, different things that she might be able to do. And some of the things in school, and this could be written into her IEP as well, is that maybe Michelle could work on the school newspaper and taking pictures for the school newspaper. Or maybe she can be working for the yearbook committee and taking pictures for that as well. And then, then once she does that, her first year of a transition, then they can help her fill out job applications, to work in a store that does photography like CVS or something like that, or to work in someplace that sells photography, just different things as different options. And, one of the things, too, that I was thinking about, and I got the idea of this, to use this as an example, when we had our youth fellow coming here to work at MAC, we had the Institute for Community Inclusion talking to us about, how to, adapt things and make it easier for the youth to come work with us. And so one of the things was to put pictures of all of us up on our office doors or up by our cubicles, so that it would, there'll be visual things to help the student, to help our fellow to settle in and know their way around. And we were going around, we were putting pictures on everything. Like, so we put a picture on the supply room. We put a picture on, like, the coffee area where you're making your copies of material. And we were putting signs on the bathroom door, and somebody says, oh, I didn't know we had 3 bathrooms. So, the signs can help everybody. The signs weren't just helping that student, they're helping everybody. And so even if you're going to be looking at it in the school situation, is that young girl could have been taking pictures, Michelle could have been taking pictures around the school and then putting it like the math department or the science department, or, and putting the pictures around the school so other people, it would help other people as well. So there's just different things that you have to do, think outside the box. So, okay. So now we're going to talk about the adult services, the Chapter 688. And this is the services that the student, your kid, your child, would receive after exiting special education. And so the school needs to make the referral for the 688 at when your child 2 years before they're leaving school, okay? So the Chapter 688 referrals is a referral that the school would make to the adult agency that they think would be working with your child once they leave school. And so Chapter 688, commonly referred to as the Turning 22 law, is a planning process which identifies services and supports that the student, your child, again, they're adult now, I get it, would need through adult services. So, again, it's a planning process and it actually lets the adult service agency know that your child is coming down the pike. So they're going to then have to put in their budget for your child to be able to get services. So this law focuses on which adult agency might provide services for your child once they leave school. And that's what, one thing that you need to remember is that these services are not guaranteed services. This is just if they have enough money to provide the services to your child, then they would do it. It's not a guarantee of services. And so that's another reason why it's really important for you to get the appropriate services while they're in school before they're leaving, so that they're as ready as possible to face the adult world. And again, it's really important for the schools to do that 688 referral the 2 years before they leave. So again, those adult agencies can plan for your young adults to come down, and get the services. The Chapter 688 is not an entitlement or guarantee of services. And again, if you remember nothing else from this part of the presentation, remember that, because it's so hard for parents to even fathom that they're getting these services through the IEP and through school, and your child's been taken care of to a certain degree. I'm not saying it's been easy. I'm not saying that it was always the right service, but at least they were getting services to help them to be successful. And we're hoping that they will get these services once they leave school, but it's not a continuation of services, and it's not an entitlement. And making the referral helps to decide which agency and what services are needed, only if there's enough money in the budget for them. Okay, so who is eligible for these adult services? So people who are automatically eligible for 688 include anyone receiving SSI or SSDI based on their disability, and anyone listed in the registry of the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. So they are automatically eligible for 688 services. All students referred to 688 must be receiving special education services in Massachusetts and in need of continuing services because of the severity of the disability. They would also have to be able to, unable to work 20 hours or more in a week of competitive employment. So what this is actually saying, without really saying that, is that the students with more severe disabilities are probably going to be the students or the folks that are getting the money for the adult services. So, and that's where, again, it's very concerning that that the adult agencies have enough money for our kids, and that why it's really important to be an advocate and make sure these referral is done for your child so that they can maybe get those adult services. There's been some changes recently. I think the last training we did was the Autism Omnibus training, and it's talking about some more services for kids for autism, adult services. So it's, people are out there, people are watching out for our kids, for kids that are maybe a little bit higher functioning, who weren't eligible for some adult services, might now be eligible under the new law. So keep that in mind if you have some older kids. Okay. So if there's no guarantee of services, why should you bother doing the 688 referral? And, again, I think, that's a really good question to ask. But, this is providing a timeline for and planning time for the state agencies. So I think that's really important, because if they can advocate for, say, if they're saying, okay, well, this year, in 2 years, I need to put $5 million in the budget because I have 50,000 kids coming down the line, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying. And this also identifies a state agency that might work with your child once they're leaving school, so which is really important. So you might know, because it could be like Mass Rehab Commission, or the Department of Developmental Services, or the Commission for the Blind, or Staff for Hard of Hearing, whichever. So it identifies these agencies. And then what they do is they create an individual transition plan. They will develop that, and that's like the state agency's IEP. So it's like an IEP for the kids when they're in the adult services, and then they can begin to plan for your child. That if you have a child that has severe disabilities, that then you have to make sure that they have the money put aside for them. Because again, if the adult agency doesn't get the money in the state budget, then they don't have to provide services for kids. Like I'm saying again, those kids with the severe disabilities would probably get the services first, and then what's left would go further, have to be stretched further for the other kids. So the individual transition plan, what does that do? It outlines the day or vacational or residential supports and services that the student might need once they exit special education, and it lists the agencies responsible for providing those services, and the transition planning form should be completed before your child is 22, and so that they have it when they're leaving. So there's no, oh, that's not true. I'll say that out. And basically, that's the presentation. Was there more questions that we can answer for you for this part?
We've got tons of other questions coming in, so if you have to go, definitely feel free. We'll still be around, and we just want you to know before you go that there will be a survey popping up on the screen. Please take a moment to answer that. Those questions are really important to us. We use them for feedback. We use them for our grant. And if you want to be in our newsletter, feel free to email me at askgupta@massadvocates.org. I'll sign you up, and feel free to visit our website, check us out on Facebook or Twitter, or make a donation. Your feedback and your support is really important to us.
No, I was just going to say that information's up on that last slide there. Shalene's email is there, as well as how you can donate. So, and we're going to answer some questions that are coming up on the screen now. So.
And on to the questions. All right. So if the student is automatically referred to 688, will they be guaranteed services through the agency that they're referred to?
No, again, there's no guarantee of services whether they're assigned to an agency or not. If the agency didn't have the money to provide those services, then they don't have to do it once they're in the adult agencies.
What if a student is homeschooled? Can they get 688?
I'm sure they can. You'd have to make the referral. A referral would have to be made to the adult agency, and they should be entitled to services. But although now that I'm thinking about it, what did it say in here? Yeah, you can make the referral, and you could see if they would be accepted into an adult agency. I would definitely say that and do that if that was the case. Okay.
What can you do if your child turns 22 and isn't eligible for 688?
Why wouldn't they? I mean, they would be eligible for 688. They should make a referral. You'd have to then figure out which agency. They might not be eligible for, like, say, for instance, CDS because their IQ is above 80 or 70 or 75. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't be eligible for another agency like MRC, which is Mass Rehab Commission. So it could be more than one. They could be eligible for a different agency. I mean, again, that's something that you could call a helpline about and to find out a little bit more information specific to your child's disability. So I could answer that question a little bit better. But
and then what's the timing on when the 688 should be completed by the school?
Again, so it's 2 years before the child or the youth is leaving school. So if they say their expected date of graduation is 18, they should make the referral at 16. If it's, if their expected graduation date age is 22, they should make the referral at 20.
And who within the school makes the referral?
Well, that's part of the special education department, so it would be whoever's on your IEP team, whether it be the chairperson or the special ed director, depending on the school system, is who makes the referral. But, if they haven't, you can always ask them to make a referral and see if they do. And you could always call the adult agencies and find out, if, you can make the referral. I don't think the parents can really make the referral, but the youth themselves might be able to. That's something I should check that out.
And then, so there's some requests for us to just go back to the previous slide so people can have a moment to look at the resources.
Oh, sure.
And then while we're doing that, some questions are coming in about transition. Have parents ever been paid to provide transitional services?
I don't know the answer to that. I haven't talked to anybody that they have, but that doesn't mean it hasn't. And that doesn't mean that it hasn't been part of some sort of agreement with the department, with an agreement with the school, an agreement with if they went to hearing or mediation. So I don't really know the answer to that. I haven't heard about it, but I don't see why I don't know. I have not heard it.
Sure. And then, so if your child is actually in an inclusive classroom, how do transition services work with their schedule?
That's actually another good question. And, it's not always easy to give the services that you need. But, again, if they're in an inclusion classroom at that age, so you're talking about maybe a younger, like a 14-year-old instead of somebody who's 18 to 22, because the 18 to 22-year-olds really wouldn't be in an inclusion program because their peers are already gone. So that, at least in my head, that's the way I'm thinking of it. So it would be like 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, maybe. So like 14 to 18-year-olds that could be included. And, and it just all depends. It's the kids that are in inclusions can still be pulled out for different services. There's the 14-year-olds wouldn't be doing the ICE program, although they could be doing something in the community, which would be important for them. And it just all depends on which way you want to make it work for them. Maybe instead of them going to a gym class, they could do walking in the community as part of their gym and learning how to get around and stop at the cash machine, learning how to use that, stopping at the store, and maybe that could be their physical education as well. So there's just different ways to look at it, and you have to, again, be creative and think outside the box with different things.
Sorry, just managing the flow of questions. Lots of them popping in.
And Shalene's reading the questions because I can't see that far away, so I can't read them.
So there are some schools that are saying that transition should be, 688 should be done at 18 so that it's seamless instead of 16. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think 16, unless your child is definitely going to be leaving school at 17, 18 years old, I think 16 is too young, and most referrals are done at 18. But if you know your child is definitely leaving school at 18, and he's going to need adult services, you should ask them to do the referral at 16.
And then if your child has met the academic requirements of the district, has passed the MCAS, and is making progress towards IEP goals, can you, the parents, still defer the diploma?
You can try. And again, I'm not saying that it's easy, but you could try, because if you don't think that they've done enough transition assessment, services for your child and given them enough to be able to be successful, then yeah, you can try it. Again, it's not going to be easy. You might need to have some of that backup documentation that says, you know, yeah, he might be the brightest kid, but he really can. He's going to fall apart the minute he leaves school. You'll have to have some maybe an outside neuropsychologist evaluations that's saying that he, you know, does not have the social skills, does not have the job skills, does not have whatever other skills that he would need. So it can't be all the time, because if you're going to be going further and going to like a mediation, a hearing, it's just not going to be the parents say. You have to have that backup documentation.
Does the transition process work the same way if your child's attending a private special ed school?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, and not necessarily, because and I don't know this as well as I should. I will be learning it probably a little bit better. But no, I don't think so, because the town can decide how to spend their money for people that are going to a private school like that, to a private paid school. And is that what they, could you read that again? What was
a private special ed school?
Oh, a private special ed school, and the school's paying for that, right? Okay, so yes, I would say that, okay, I'm backing up now, changing my mind, is that yes, that's the same way that it should be working, but again, it's a little bit tricky because, you know, your child's in an out-of-district school for a reason, and learn, you know, and these, I'm not saying that 766, that special education and transition is new, it's not, but these services, people are more focusing on what's going to happen next, and these schools have to catch up with what services should be for our kids. So I don't know if that answered your question. I think it did, but yes, they can still be getting transition services. Is it going to be as easy? It might be that I know somebody who had an out-of-district placement for their child, and then they wanted their child to do the ICE program, so they brought them back into the town school. They left their private placement and came back into the town, and they then were going to the inclusive concurrent enrollment program, along with getting some other services still through the school, but that's what they decided to do would be best for them. There are, I don't believe, any private 766 schools in a partnership right now, but there's a couple of collaborative schools in a partnership. I don't know if that's helpful, but just some information.
Switching over to public schools again now, what if you want something for your child that's not even offered on a standard education? Like, say your child is very gifted musically and you want transition services to prep them for a musical career. Is that something that can be done? How do you fight for it since it's not even something included in the standard track.
Well, again, I mean, if you look at it this way, if you have a child that's on an IEP and we're asking for transition services, that's kind of not on the standard track, if you look at it that way. So if what your child is, they did assessments, they came up with the fact that your child has their strengths, preferences, and interests are in the music field, then they can work with that child to figure out what's the best way to make what they want happen. So whether that be taking some courses in school that they're in that would allow them to excel, I can't say excel because I guess you can't use that word, but to actually be successful in the field that they're interested in. Don't say excel. I shouldn't have used that word. Now whether, I know at one point, were they talking about, I think it was the art schools, that they were talking about joining the colleges. The goal is to have all the colleges to be able to participate in some sort of ICE type of program down the line. So, I mean, it's not that it could not happen, not like the music school would do it as well. But a lot of our students that, because they have a disability, we have a lot of kids that, really excel in something. And it should be a focus for that student during transition, and can be, whatever makes it work.
So what options are there available to parents when a school district makes very limited efforts in transition planning, and particularly if the parents are low income or have few resources? Right. What can they do?
Right. So so they could call our helpline, and we have our helpline is wonderful. Leslie Lockhart is our helpline coordinator, and she does an amazing amount of work talking to the parents and giving them advice and what the next step should be. So that's a lot of things that we could do is we could say, okay, you tell us what's going on, the parent talks to us. A lot of times what we find out is that the parent needs to, we can't help them until they get some more evaluations. So we can tell them that's what the next step is, and we can give them names of different places to go for the different assessments if that's what the next step is. If we feel the next step is that they need to have an advocate, if we can't help them here at MAC, because we can take very few cases, we do have an advocate and an attorney that works on some cases here, but again, that's two people, and we can't take as many as we would like. And if we can help, we try to give names of advocates and attorneys that do either sliding fee scale or maybe some pro bono work as well. So, Leslie's a great resource to figure out what. And if you're calling our helpline and you can afford to pay for an advocate attorney, we can give you names of people that, of course you could pay to do this as well. So there's a lot of options. Well, I can't say a lot of options because it's not easy to find advocates and attorneys that would do this. But as I said, Leslie does an amazing job making these connections and trying to make that happen. So, yes, that's what you need to do. But it might be that you need to have those outside assessments first, which usually is the case.
And then if your child is participating in the ICE program, can you request that a coach from the school from their high school help them with things like taking public transport to college or taking notes or sort of navigating the new atmosphere?
Yes, that is part of the ICE program. And a lot of times is that, well, it depends on the program. Some of the ICE programs have that type of the education coach paid for. The college has that person. In some cases, the school sends them as an education coach. So it just depends on what partnership you're with or you would be joining. And that the partners have education coaches that will be there for them, that will, teach them the skills they need to, be successful, be social, because they want you to be enjoying the whole life of the campus, not just taking the courses. They want you there to be able to do maybe some sports and some of the other things that are available, some of the clubs that are available. And as a matter of fact, one of the youth fellow that I was talking about, our first year fellow, he was participating in the ICE program, and he loved music, and they didn't have any type of music type of club. So he created one, and it's still there now. Well, as far as I know, last time I checked, it was. And it was still there. So he created this music club with the professor and with some other students, and that club is, it was a great idea. And so he made a difference in the school, too, because he advocated for that. So, again, it just all depends on the partnership. And but, yes, you can, that is part of the ICE program.
And then when it comes to creating that IEP, is there anything that's absolutely critical to include to ensure that your child is able to get support that they need in college, or to pave the way for college?
Say it again. I need to hear that one again.
So when you're sitting down and writing out that IEP, is there anything that you recommend including or is absolutely critical to make sure that college happens and support at college happens?
Okay, well, one thing to remember is when your child is leaving high school and going on to college, that they don't follow an IEP at the college. So they can't, you can't say, oh, here's the IEP, you do everything in there. That doesn't happen. And the student doesn't get services through the college unless they self-identify saying that they need some help, okay? And then they have to show, that they actually do need help, that they have a disability. So they would have to show some evaluations, like maybe a psych report or an old IEP or, the most recent IEP. Although you can show them the IEP, that doesn't mean they have to follow it. So, it just all depends on the kid. That's a hard question to answer because everybody is so different. But like I said, one of my sons, he got some really good services and really good supports from his school, and he was very successful. He had somebody who was a note taker for him, whereas my other son, although I think he would have benefited from a note taker, never wanted to do that. So again, I think it's a personal decision of how and when to self-identify. But in order to get, so both my kids had, we called it the plus plan, that they were in school for, one was 5.5 years, one was 5 years, because they didn't self-identify right away, and they had to drop some classes the first semester because they weren't doing well in them, because they weren't getting the support they needed to be successful. So, again, that's a hard question to answer without, maybe getting a little bit more information. But whatever you could think of, extended time for the student, it was great that they did, they could tape the professor, giving his lectures and things like that. That was so helpful for my son. And one of the things, as I said, my oldest son went to UMass Lowell, and one of the things they did there is that, like a lot of kids, you do get FAFSA, and you get money, and you get financial aid and all that stuff. And one of the part of the financial aid is work study. And one of the things for work study that UMass Lowell was doing is that they paid kids as part of a work study to take notes in classes for those who needed the notes. So it was a really good kind of like partnership, So, again, it's thinking outside the box, and they did that at UMass Lowell. But that doesn't mean every school would do that.
So the law states that your vision for your child guides the IEP process.
Well, your student's vision, but yeah.
Or your student. Do you have any tips on creating that vision and how to do it?
It's a really good question, and again, you need to make sure that you talk to your child, that you know what they really want, and you can talk to your child even before 14, to try to guide them of what they might want to do and give them some ideas. Do you like this? Do you like that? Because our kids aren't always thinking that way. And what kid is actually at, 16, 17 years old? They're really not thinking of what they're going to do when they leave school. They're thinking about, who they're going to hang around with after they get out of school, or, what are they going to be doing after school, So it just all depends on the student, and I think I need that question read to me again so that I can.
I think you answered it. Tips on, how to plan that IEP.
Yeah, well, okay.
Yeah.
If you think I answered it, I'll trust you.
You're doing great.
Okay, good. Okay.
And then some clarification questions.
Okay.
Do students in the ICE program earn actual college credits?
Depending. Some of them have, again, it's hard to know how the student is, but some of them have gotten college credits for some of their courses, And so the answer is yes, it can be. Some of them have audited the classes. Some of them audited the class 1 year and then retook it the second year and then got credit for it. So again, it just all depends on the student.
And what sorts of services does MRC offer?
MRC, I'm not the right person to answer that question, I don't think. I don't know if there's anybody from MRC online, but they provide, you know, they actually will give you some support so that you can, beginning support. And of maybe somebody who, like a job coach for a little bit of a time. They might even provide, you know, some, like maybe in their office, say for instance, of some of the stuff like we're suggesting that the kids do in school is like filling out the job applications and things like that. That type of support, they don't get the in-depth, severe, like MRC is usually for kids that are probably a little bit higher functioning and aren't as needy as the kids that are on getting services from DDS. So they're not as intensive services as they are. But again, I think it depends on each child, and it could be different from child to child.
Is there a list of transition specialists statewide that we could provide?
I can look that up. If you want to call our helpline, we can see if there is one. I don't know if there is right now.
Is there an exemption from foreign language in high school for children with autism? If so, can they still get into a college without it?
Yeah, I don't know if I understand that question. Or read it again.
Is there an exemption from foreign language in high school for students with autism? And if they're exempted, can they still get into college without having foreign language under their belt?
Yeah, I don't really know the answer to that question. I don't think I can help that one. I'm sorry. I'm thinking that 1 year I took my kid out of foreign language, but I think they did have 2 years under their belt, and that was enough for their schools.
Sure. And then a broader question. If you are providing education to your child as a parent and the school uses that as an excuse to withhold services, what can you do? Like say you're educating your child on your own in terms of living skills and social skills, so then the school is like, well, you know, you're providing it, we don't need to.
Right, and that goes back to, I don't know if you were on at the beginning, but I talked about how there was something in the law that said that the schools can't ask a parent of a child with a disability to do more than they would ask a typical child family. So if they're just assuming that you're doing that or saying that you're doing that so they're not going to do it for them, that's illegal, and I think you could fight that. I think that's something that you could do. Go to maybe a mediation about and talk to a mediator about it, because I think that is absolutely wrong.
If you have any more questions, please send them in. We'll be around for a couple more minutes before wrapping things up. Again, don't forget to visit our website, massadvocates.org, and to check us out on Twitter and Facebook at Mass Advocates.
And don't forget to fill out the did you just say that? No. The survey when it pops up when you're signing off.
And if you have any additional feedback, which you can't fit it in the survey or anything, please just email it to me at scupt@massadvocates.org. My email address is right up there on the screen. If you need anything else after this webinar, have further questions, feedback, feel free to email me. So with regard to the foreign language question, we have a comment coming in where someone's saying that they were told by a college counselor that if you don't meet it, you can go to community college first and then work to transfer to a 4-year school. That was something that came into us on the comments. If you want to email us more about foreign language, we can take a look at that after.
Yeah, sorry, because I really don't know the answer to that, and I don't want to give the wrong information.
And then Joanne, do you know the law which says that you don't have to provide more education or services than quote unquote a normal child would receive as a parent?
No, again, I don't have that in front of me, but it's in the law somewhere, and I would have to find that. But you can call me. I mean, my email is kind of similar to Shalene's. It's jpino@massadvocates.org. So you could email me to remind me, and then I can try to find that for you. Again, that's jpino@massadvocates.org, and it's my email. And you can send me that question, and I can look it up, and then I'll have your email, and I could answer you on that, where that is in the law.
Another helpful comment from our lovely audience is that ASL might be considered a foreign language. Another question here is, do you add a transition goal on the IEP, or do you add transition to all of your existing and new goals?
Well, it could be both ways, but it depends on, again, the need of the student. But it could be both ways. So transition could be added onto the goals that are already in there, as long as they haven't met those goals. And you want to make sure they are all refreshed, because there'll be yearly goals that will help you to meet the transition goal in the vision statement. So the child's vision is, I want to go to college and become a photographer. All right, just put that out there. And so, and take photography classes at school. So what are you going to need to do every year during that year while you're there? Because he's still in school, he needs some goals to do it. So what courses will he have to take then to be able to take those courses at school and be ready for them, for the college courses? What else does he need to work on? To MCAS goals would be there, but then there would also be more goals written to help get there as well. Like, okay, let's start looking at colleges that are good for photography. Let's get applications and start applying to the schools. Let's start making taking pictures and making a portfolio so that's ready for the school. So that's all different things that could be written. It could be either way, or both, or a combination.
All right. That is all I'm seeing in terms of, oh, sorry, one more. Several more coming in. So is a formal transition assessment necessary for all students on an IEP, or can that be done informally? And how should that process be documented in the IEP, other than developing goals and benchmarks?
So, again, I think there's a combination of formal and informal assessments, and depending on the needs of the child. I mean, I think that there should be a combination of both. I can't say which ones for your child because I don't know your child, but I think there should definitely be a combination of both. At least 1 year, the first year at 14. And then each year, and every 3 years it needs to be redone. So then 3 years later, you would get another one, so 14, 15, 16, 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. And but in the meantime, in between each year, they could maybe just do some informal assessments. So again, it depends on what the need of the child is. And sometimes our kids change so much in a year that you might need to be doing more than informal each year.
All right, and we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming and being such a fantastic audience. Not only did we have wonderful questions, we also had people sharing information around and providing some very helpful tips. So
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.